Um, Welcome to the 5th ICMR 2020. And first of all, I'm grateful to the organizing committee for giving me this opportunity to introduce one of the well-known scholar in the academia. The task of introducing him is a great honor and privilege to me. I'm so excited to do that. And ladies and gentlemen, let me allow to introduce him. Our speaker obtained his basic degree from the University of Delaware, United States of America. In 1994, he obtained his master's from Columbia University, United States of America, in the field of social works. In 2005, he obtained his PhD from the University of Putra Malaysia in the field of youth studies. Currently, he is a professor in the Department of Professional Development and Continuing Education, Faculty of Educational Studies, University Putra Malaysia. He teaches graduate courses in advanced qualitative research methods and youth and society, and undergraduate courses in youth development and community resource development. He is also involved in a number of research projects related to youth development. His projects include national studies on youth engagement and community connectedness, and the personal development experiences of young social entrepreneurs. He has also been involved in a multi-year collaborative research project with the School of Human Ecology of the University of Wisconsin, United States of America, and exploring youth-adult partnership in youth and community program settings. Very simply, his passion is to understand the lives of young people. He has been awarded many times for his research skills and contribution to the academia, including Excellence in Publication Award in 2018, Excellence in Service Award in 2007, 2008, 2009, and 2017 from University Putra Malaysia. Further, in 2010, he was awarded the Majlis Penerbitan Ilmiah Malaysian Award for the Best Journal Article. In addition, he has won many awards and medals for research publication in his career so far. He has published over 80 peer-reviewed articles in national and international journals, and regularly assists students and colleagues through a variety of training activities related to qualitative research methods and journal articles writing. He has guided many students to achieve their masters and PhDs as supervisor, and contributed to the tertiary education, holding many positions in the university system and professional memberships with many professional bodies. He has more than 3,700 citations in Google Scholar with H index of 22, and more than 1,300 citations in ResearchGate. Very frankly, the time is not enough to describe this vast academic potential of our keynote speaker. It was a great challenge for me to introduce him within 5 minutes time. However, distinguished invitees, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Stephen Eric Krauss, alias Abdul Latif. Professor Latif, this virtual audience is for you now. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that very warm welcome. And it's a real honor to be invited to the conference today. I hope you can all hear me and see me. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides here. Actually, it's, yeah. Okay. Can everyone hear me and see me? Okay, I'm assuming you can all hear me and see me. I'm not getting any response. So anyway, I will just proceed. So I'm very honored to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you for that warm welcome. So my topic today is going to center on my field of...
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
But the slide share is not shared yet.
Oh, it is on my screen. Hold on, let me try again. Let me try. Can you see it now? Oops. Can you see the slides now? Let me take it back. Okay, I'll get started. Okay, so my topic today is focusing on young people. as we know from what we see in the media all the time, young people are being dramatically affected by.
Yes, sir, we can hear you now. And we can see the screen as well.
Great, thank you. All right, that means we're successful. Okay. So as we know, COVID-19 has had a dramatic effect on the lives of young people. And so today I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of COVID-19 as a historical event for youth, and what this means for, or what this could mean for management researchers and practitioners as well, also other social scientists. The idea of a historical event is something that has had a dramatic impact on an entire generation. And if we look historically at other historical events on young people, things like the Great Depression in the 1930s, in the Malaysian context of Malaysia, the independence, 1957 independence of the country was another historical event that has had a dramatic impact on young people. Things like the moon missions in the 1960s and 70s had a dramatic effect on young people's educational futures, in the sense that they presented them with a new idea and vision for what science can do, and made them see and think beyond even what's on this planet in terms of their futures. September 11th is an obvious one, at least for our generation, within the past 20 years. It has had a dramatic effect on young people's lives, especially the lives of young people living in the Middle East, in Africa, and in other countries that have been directly affected, as well as those of us who have been indirectly affected in so many different ways. And then another Malaysian example, because I'm based in Malaysia, the Malayan emergency, the communist insurgency had a dramatic impact on that country, and in some ways is still today indirectly shaping Malaysian thinking, Malaysian policy making, and so forth. So the idea of a historical event and how it affects young people's futures is a very important concept. And I think when we talk about COVID-19, we have to also think about COVID-19 as a historical event for today's youth. It is having a dramatic effect on young people. And then we can only speculate as to how it's going to impact young people's future developmental trajectories. In other words, how it's going to affect their educational lives, how it's going to affect their career lives, how it's going to affect their health lives. It's important that not only do we deal with the pandemic directly today in the short term, but that we think about the ways that this could possibly affect young people in the future. Especially for management researchers and practitioners, those of us who are involved in organizations, maybe we have young people in our organizations in different contexts. How are we going to work with young people given the dynamic that COVID-19 has caused us? So I'm going to only look at it from, since I'm limited in terms of my time, I'm going to look at it from three perspectives. And there's many other potential ways we could think about COVID-19 as a historical event shaping the lives of young people. I'm going to look at it from three. Okay, so we're going to look at two main questions. All right, how is COVID-19 as a historical event changing patterns and trajectories of youth future well-being? And then what are the implications for this on management and social science researchers and professionals? How can we use this kind of thinking, these questions, to shape how we conduct research and then practice with young people into the future? And so, as I mentioned, I'm going to focus on three perspectives. The first one being career. All right. How is COVID-19 shaping the career futures of young people? The second one being health. How is COVID-19, since it is a health pandemic, a health emergency, how is it going to, and how is it shaping young people's future health trajectories? And then the last one is one that we don't hear so much about. I'm going to call it spirituality. We hear a lot about the issue of mental illness, of coping, and so forth. I'm going to try and shift that a little bit to something related but a bit different: spirituality. It's one of the dimensions of this pandemic that I don't think is being talked about enough in the mainstream media, especially. And I think it is having a dramatic impact on young people's lives. And I think we need to begin to explore the implications of that for the future. So let me get right to it. I'm going to start with career. So the question is, how is COVID-19 shaping youth's career futures? All right. If what we see in the newspapers every day, online, in the media, social media, etc., we often see this very bleak outlook for young people now. All right, adapting one's career to the post-COVID-19 world, and it often sort of is painted like this: things are looking very bleak. Right? We just heard from Prof. Aslim and the tourism industry on how severely affected the tourism industry has been. How many young people in the tourism industry in our respective countries have lost their jobs? How many of them are facing career crises? How many of them are being forced to retrain and reskill so that they can become relevant again for some hopeful future career? So the outlook is painted as such. It's very bleak. In Malaysia, we have, In Malaysia, we have the rise of what's called the gig economy, and I'm sure in Sri Lanka, as in other countries, we also have the rise of what's known as the gig economy. That economy that is occupying young people in part-time work, work that is not necessarily related to their areas of training, work that is not permanent, work that does not provide exceptional salaries or benefits. It's more seen as something done on a part-time basis, something done on a freelance basis. This kind of economy, as we know, is growing. And it's not only that it's growing, but it's growing unevenly. If we look at this chart up here, and this is going back to 2018, this is pre-pandemic. We can only imagine now that it's even worse. But if we look on the chart, we'll see that in terms of the gig economy, a larger percentage of the gig economy is growing, expanding in mostly the Asian countries. Okay, and here we just look at 3 examples of Indonesia, China, and India have the largest percentage of young people involved in gig economy work. All right, and so this is 2018. We can only imagine now with the pandemic how much that's grown. So this emphasis, this new reality of the gig economy, how is that going to play out in terms of young people and their future notion of career? This is the question that we have to ask. So if we look at some real life stories, and I just pulled a few of these out just to give this idea some life, put a face on it, as we say. This is an example from the United States, where I'm originally from, but I've been living in Malaysia for 20 years. But there was a very good article on one of the major networks on how COVID-19 is actually affecting young people and their careers and in their lives in general. And they had several stories. And so I just want to share some of these little vignettes, these little mini stories about this. And just to show how COVID-19 is really affecting young people's career trajectories, their career directions, even in something like medicine, someone that's going to become a doctor. Okay, so here we have Vinay Rao, who was preparing to graduate medical school and begin his residency at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital in Philadelphia, a major US city. However, instead of a traditional introduction to practicing medicine, he had to abruptly shift to an alarming new reality, one in which he'd been helping patients battle COVID-19, a disease compounded by the city's stark racial differences in healthcare access. To be effective healthcare providers, Rao explains, my colleagues and I now have to do more than treat the individual patient at his or her bedside. We have to delve into the disparities affecting the communities in which we serve. So now a doctor, because of COVID-19, someone training as a doctor cannot just be training in the field of medicine, the physiological aspects of medicine. They have to think the way a social scientist would think, even sometimes the way an activist would think, to realize that this pandemic is affecting all levels of society and it's going to create new levels of inequality in society. So doctors now have to be like social service workers in their practice of medicine, okay? And so that's just one example. This is a young person who's still in medical school, yet the pandemic is already shifting his career trajectory and even how he originally envisioned himself to be a doctor and to be practicing medicine. Okay, and this is one example, and this is a doctor, someone at, in a profession that's seen as a sort of a high esteemed profession. Okay, what about those in other lesser professions, less, lower paying professions and so forth? How is the pandemic affecting their career trajectories? We can only imagine, right? We can only imagine. So the next one I want to just touch on is health. Now, we know about health and COVID-19. Obviously, it's a health pandemic. It's a health emergency. It's a health crisis. But when we talk about health, we have to realize that health now, we can no longer just look at the health of the body. Okay, so we know a few things about COVID-19. The research coming out is literally changing by the day. New things are being learned every day about the pandemic. So we know, for example, that coronavirus deaths increase according to age. It's a pandemic. It's a virus that affects elderly or older people much worse than younger people. All right, and it also affects those with pre-existing conditions much worse than those who have no pre-existing conditions. Okay, so these two facts we know have been pretty much established. However, we don't know as much about, and we're still learning a lot more about, the mental health effects, especially on young people. And if we look at some of the early data coming out about mental health, we can see very alarming statistics, very alarming trends. And again, going back to that same article, the risk is not just limited to economics. According to the National Center for Health Statistics survey, which relies on the same mental health scale used by medical professionals, between January and June 2019, 10% of 18 to 34-year-olds showed clinically significant symptoms of an anxiety disorder. 5% experienced a major depressive disorder, and 12% reported anxiety and/or depression. This was pre-COVID-19. Now, what's happened since COVID-19? Since the pandemic, the percentage of Americans, and this is again an American example, especially younger ones dealing with mental health issues, has increased at an alarming rate. Over a 6-day period in early June of this year, according to the National Center for Health Statistics, 41% of 18 to 34-year-olds showed clinically significant symptoms of an anxiety disorder. 35% experienced a major depressive disorder, and 47.5% reported anxiety and/or depression. That's nearly half the sample. That is a massive number of young people who are experiencing serious mental health issues, right? And that was back in June. Now it may even be worse. That was almost 4 months ago. Okay, and of course now we know that cases are spiking now, going up and so forth. So we can only imagine how this is going to shape young people's health futures. Well, they start to think differently about their health, right? So for example, there is some early evidence that diet has a lot to play in the severity of COVID-19 symptoms. Those who who are more metabolically healthy tend to show less symptoms and tend to have better outcomes with the virus. Will these types of things begin to shape the way young people make decisions about their health? Okay, again, thinking about the long-term impact of health on young people. That is what we are trying to look deeper into. And then the third one, spirituality, as I mentioned. How is COVID-19 shaping youth's spiritual futures, right? What effect is it having on their ability to derive a sense of meaning in life? What is it and how is it affecting their ability to cope, to understand, and to make meaning of what's happening around them? Okay, it's often said that the current generation suffers from a crisis of meaning, right? It's a generation that is constantly engaged in a social way, mostly in online formats. But those who are scholars in the fields of socio-emotional well-being, religiosity, spirituality, have also tapped on this idea that young people are spiritually less centered and less grounded than they used to be, and so that affects their ability to cope with major life shocks, right? Major life changes. COVID-19 is obviously a major life shock. How are young people adapting? How are young people coping? And how is it going to affect them in the future? These are the things that are not really being discussed, especially in the mainstream media. So for example, again, going back to our vignettes, our stories, Ariana Godfrey, a Detroit native, could not have been more excited for the final weeks of high school. Though she was juggling an internship and a part-time job, she was ready to celebrate prom and graduation with her closest friends and family. Then the pandemic struck, and within weeks, everyone in Godfrey's 11-person household was infected or exhibiting coronavirus symptoms. Still, she says, I kept reminding myself it could be worse. One of them could die. Okay, so young people now are facing the real threat of loved ones dying, friends dying, themselves becoming ill. And especially for young people in places like Detroit, United States, these things were so far from their reality in the past, and now they are literally being seen, reminded of them every day. Around the same time, Katie O'Reilly had landed a healthcare consultancy job in San Francisco, which she planned to start soon after her graduation from Vanderbilt University. But her hopes of beginning the next chapter of her life and paying down her $15,000 in student loans were soon dashed. As COVID-19 wreaked havoc on the economy, the consultancy firm pushed back her start date to 2021, with little guarantee that it would happen at all. Though I understood why they had made this decision, my ability to maintain my composure, to hold on to hope, temporarily receded into the background, she writes. So even that sense of hopelessness creeping into young people's lives, okay? Again, how is this going to impact them in the future? How does this impact them, their ability to do their jobs every day for those that are still working? Okay, so as management professors, professionals, as management practitioners, as management researchers, as social science researchers, we need to start thinking about these long-term trends. Again, a historical, an episode like this, a historical episode like this is going to have impact effects maybe for another generation. And so as researchers, we should always be thinking about sort of looking into the future and trying to understand where these trends are going to lead to. So where does that leave us? Now let's look at some of the implications. All right, so some of the implications for management scientists and professionals: new avenues of exploration and service provision. Like all things in the world of social sciences, the COVID-19 pandemic now opens up new doors for avenues of exploration and different opportunities for service provision. So in the last presentation by Prof. Aslam, which was a very nice and very interesting, insightful presentation, I learned so much about the tourism industry from his presentation, so many things I did not know. But one of the things I thought was very interesting is that he showed some very innovative ways that tourism businesses or tourist businesses are adjusting now to COVID-19 and the way that they're doing business. And I think we have to, as social scientists, as management scientists, we have to also start thinking about different ways that we can provide young people with services, essential services during and immediately after the COVID-19 pandemic. In a recent article by some health-based scholars, they talk about coping with COVID-19, a call for youth engagement and the inclusion of young people in matters that affect their lives. And I was very excited to see this article only because the people that wrote it are actually from the field of medical sciences. And myself being a youth development scientist, this is an issue and this is a topic that's very close to my heart, which is youth engagement and youth participation. And when I saw this by these scholars in the field of medicine, I was very excited because it's something that I have been studying for a very long time. It's something that I've always sworn to be critical for effective practice with young people, especially when we look at young people within organizations, okay? And you can see in the picture there, bringing young people to the table. Here it's a literal, it's a literal picture, a literal representation of bringing young people to the table, because here young people are literally at the table. But bringing young people to the table means bringing them in as planners, bringing them in as decision makers, all right? Youth participating and youth working with adults in partnership is a critical strategy for empowering youth, especially during something like COVID-19, because one of the one of the most important and perhaps the most damaging side effects or externalities of COVID-19 is the alienation that it is causing among everybody, especially young people. You know, young people who are used to being social. Young people have these tremendous social networks, and those networks are completely closed down. So they feel this tremendous sense of alienation, right? So how do we re-engage them and empower them to be healthy, to cope, and to give them something meaningful within their organizational lives, okay? Regardless of what type of organization we're talking about, all right? So we know from research that youth organizational engagement can happen in many different ways. So if you're in an organization, if you're running an organization and you want to think about or you want to strategize how to bring in young people to make their work lives more meaningful during COVID-19, there's a lot of ways, okay? Something called youth-adult partnership can occur in many different phases and many different levels within an organization, okay? It can happen in the area of training and outreach. Young people make great, energetic trainers, right? It can happen in activism and organizing, okay? It can happen in communication and media. Young people are brilliant at communicating, especially in social media. They can play critical and integral roles within an organization in getting the word out and communicating the organization's work, okay? They're great at doing service. They love to volunteer, philanthropy. The best thing you can do is during something like COVID-19 is give somebody the opportunity to give back. Make opportunities, create opportunities for them to give back, right? That is one of the best ways we can cope in a situation like COVID-19, is to go out of our way and to help others. Doing research, doing evaluation work for the organization, all right? Young people make very energetic researchers. They're naturally curious. That is an essential characteristic for a good researcher, to be curious. So teach them the methods of research and let them do research for your organization. And they can even be involved in governance and even policy making. Getting the youth voice, getting the youth perspective on issues, especially if your organization serves youth or it has youth as clients, youth as a market, getting your young employees, getting your young colleagues involved can be very beneficial for the organization's planning and for the organization's governance, okay? So we know youth-adult partnership can take place in many different levels within an organization. Something else that we know about youth-adult partnership in organizations is that when youth and adults work together, good things tend to happen, okay? So from research, we know that from youth-adult partnership within organizations, staff often become more committed and more confident, okay? Young people in the organization gain important skills and attitudes, right? It changes their attitude towards the organization. They get a stronger sense of belonging. They acquire decision-making skills, problem-solving skills, communication skills, so many things. Organizations become more inclusive and responsive to youth, and that's very important if you have a lot of young employees in the organization. Communities become more supportive of youth participation. So having communities that see young people as assets is going to be a bonus for your organization. Okay, so these are just a few of the things that we've learned from this type of youth engagement in organizations. Another area in terms of implications for our organizations, for our management folks, is this understanding of COVID-19 as a career shock. Okay, so here these researchers, Ackermans, Richardson, and Kramer, they wrote about this is a very interesting article about COVID-19 as a career shock and the implications for career and vocational behavior. So as a career shock, what happens is that somebody loses a job, somebody is forced to make a career shift, right? So maybe they're in industry, they have to now look for something else. Maybe they were in government, they've lost their job, they have to find something else. Maybe they were self-employed, maybe they were in tourism, right? So we have in Malaysia, we have airline pilots who have lost their jobs, who are now selling food on the streets, right? They've become food stall vendors because they've lost their job as airline pilots, okay? So that is what we would call a career shock, a major turn of events. So the researchers in this article, what they've found from research on career shocks from past events, three main lessons that I just want to share with you today. The first one is that individual preparation is really important. So there's always an interplay between external events, like something like COVID-19, and an individual's internal agency and competencies, right? So the more competent people are, the better that they can handle these external changes that come from something like COVID-19, okay? So we really need to focus on helping people to become prepared all the time, you know, similarly like the way that they teach the Boy Scouts, right? Preparation, everything they teach is about preparation, right? Or military personnel, right? Very few military endeavors are planned. I mean, they have a general plan of what they want to do, but all of the training in the military is all about preparation so that whatever circumstance they find themselves in, they can survive, and not only survive, but they can actually become victorious or overcome whatever challenges they're facing. All right. So helping our employees, helping our colleagues be prepared is what we need to focus on. All right. Thinking about short term and the long term. All right. So of course, much of our concern now is on the short term because, hey, COVID-19 is a very serious pandemic. We have a lot of people out there that cannot even afford to put food on the table now, right? So of course, there's a lot of concern about the short term impact and addressing short-term needs. But we also need to think about the long-term, right? So we need to think about how about those people that are at different career stages, right? So those that are just starting out in their careers, what are the long-term, what's the long-term future look like? How about those in the middle of their careers, mid-career level or later in their careers? So there's a short-term impact, but there's also the long-term impact that we have to start thinking about as well. And we need to be prepared for that long-term impact as well. And I think the first one, being individually prepared, helps to address that long-term impact. Opportunities for career exploration and change. Career shocks are not always a negative thing. Even in a situation like COVID-19, negative career shocks can incur positive career outcomes. It is possible. There are many cases where people who were in careers where they were sort of languishing, they weren't really thriving, they were just sort of coping, they were just sort of getting by day to day. Then COVID-19 hits, right? Maybe they have lost their job, they are forced to shift gears, they're forced to shift direction in their careers. That can often be a positive change because it often ignites something in the person to make, to pick themselves up and to sort of make the effort to become reskilled, make the effort to commit themselves to a new career, okay? So negative career shocks are not always negative. Sometimes they can have a positive outcome. And so we have to look at the different ways that these negative, short-term negative outcomes can be turned into positive long-term outcomes by empowering people and supporting people in their new career trajectories, okay? So that's one of the ways that we can make a career shock something positive. So now we are starting to see this idea that's going out there in the literature where there's a shift from career planning to career preparation, right? If we're gonna live in a world where, not just this COVID-19, there could be a COVID-20, in a couple years. There could be a COVID-21 a couple years down the road. We're living in an age where there is increasing, again, this VUCA is an old kind of thing, but a volatile age, an uncertain age, unpredictable, right? How do you deal with a lack of ability to predict the future? Well, you prepare, all right? You prepare. You don't plan because you can't plan. We don't know what the future is going to hold. So the best we can do is prepare. And how do we prepare? We prepare by making ourselves as competent as possible, by acquiring as many competencies as we can, and by, like the Boy Scouts, being prepared for whatever situation comes our way. So I think we're going to start to see in the literature, even in the sciences, this is the career sciences, management sciences, and so forth. We're going to start to see more of this shift towards this idea of career preparation rather than career planning. Okay, and one more, the impact of COVID-19 on information management research. Now, we were already living in a management, on a knowledge and information sort of society, right, before COVID-19. Now we have to look at research and data as being essential for helping our young people, young employees, and so forth, chart their new futures, right? So there's many examples of this out there. Here's one: 4 big data analytics tools changing youth sports, right? So using big data and research to improving youth sports outcomes. Okay, something we would never think of, right? Between research data and sports. Yes, it can be used. Another one for business, all right, for helping small businesses, for innovation, okay, using big data and research as a way of helping small businesses to plot new futures, all right? So we really have to leverage research. We really have to leverage data to help young people be better prepared for their future. And the last one I want to emphasize is, in terms of implications, is the need to really provide support, right? So maybe in the past, providing support was something that we did, but we didn't really see it as essential, right? It wasn't really essential, right? I saw this and I thought this was really nice. Good morning. Make sure you test positive for faith, keep distance from doubt, and isolate from fear. Trust God through it all, okay? So this idea that we need to be strong in our coping ability during times like COVID-19. And for those of us who are in organizations and management, this is really essential. We need workers that are in a sound state of health, both physically as well as mentally, as well as emotionally, as well as socially, as well as spiritually, right? These are going to be the most effective employees for our organizations, right? So organizational management must be aware of youth's spiritual and psychosocial needs moving forward, okay? As I showed before, the rates and the levels of mental illness, anxiety, depression are skyrocketing, right? You cannot have effective organizations, you cannot have productive organizations where people's well-being is affected to that degree, all right? So organizations have to do all that they can to prioritize this type of support, this psychosocial and spiritual support for our young, all workers, of course, all workers, but especially for young workers who might be more prone to these types of illnesses, right? And with that, I like